Good afternoon, and welcome to the Erev Yontif edition of the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi, very holy group that learns Daf Yomi as we're getting ready for Yontif. What better way to be prepared for Yontif than to be mentally ready by learning Torah? Hopefully our wives will think highly of us as a result, because this is where we give extra credit to our wives. Hello. Welcome in.
I'll come this way. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. And Daf Yomi is sponsored the week by Joel Kastner in honor of Rabbi Loiterman and the Kahal Yereim Daf Yomi Shiur. And today's Daf is sponsored by Mr. Jeffrey Wald in honor of our amazing hostesses over Sukkah, Chava Bela Wald, Ariella Loiterman, Michelle Schiffman, Rachel Gislason, Hannah Bernstein, and Sarah Durbach. Thank you very, very much. That is amazing. And also, Monday's Daf is sponsored by today's Daf Ruvain and Sarah Durbach. B'zchus refuah shlema for Ruvain's cousin Yaron ben Fega Etta, who's in surgery right now. So it's a good time to be able to be learning right now. Okay, so the brief review of what we had encountered. We've been discussing washing hands, the Kohen's responsibility of washing hands as he enters to do service in the Beis HaMikdash. We discussed that there's generally a rule about something called lina, which is where you have service that gets left overnight, becomes invalidated the next day. Water that is in the kior, if it's left overnight, then the next day, because it's in the service utensil, can become invalidated. We questioned, there is a potential that that's subject to an argument, a machlokas between Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, whether it's going to be nullified overnight or not. Okay. Then we had three different viewpoints according to the opinion that says that it does get nullified overnight. The question is, at what point does it get nullified and for what? Right? If you have the kior unsubmerged at nightfall, then the first opinion was supposing. Hang on, just which way you want to go?
I did the same thing.
Walk around. Okay. If the kior is unsubmerged at nightfall, then that's going to invalidate the water part of the way, right? Then we had also if it's unsubmerged in the morning, that's going to invalidate the water all the way for any sort of purposes. And then we had a second opinion that says you don't really have to worry about whether it's submerged or not submerged at nightfall. You only have to worry about it in the morning. And then Rabbi Yochanan, who seemed to say the same thing as that second opinion, right? And the difference was that Rabbi Yochanan had held that there's a mitzvah to make sure that that kior gets submerged. When we say it's submerged, there was a trap door in the floor of the Beis HaMikdash floor, and they would open it up, and they would have the winch and pulley system, and they would lift the kior up and lower it down into the water below, and that was where it was supposed to remain. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you leave it there as much as possible. According to Rav Chisda, right, you don't need to lower it down, right? You can leave it out there. All you have to worry about is make sure that it gets submerged at some point before dawn, okay? And that's where we're up to. So Meisvei, so they asked the following question against Rav Chisda, who seems to say you don't have to worry about lowering the kior down below. It says like so. Lo hayu roin oso. If you imagine, this is a great Mishnah in Meseches Tamid. Paints the picture and imagine the scene. It's pitch black. You're in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. I suppose it wouldn't be a full moon. Let's say, be a dark night. And not only that, but the people, the Kohanim, were in a room on the side, to the north side of the courtyard, and the kior, as we saw, is on towards the south side, on the other side of the mizbeach. So the Kohen, who would get the responsibility of doing the Trumas Hadeshen, his job was to scoop up the ashes. He went out there first, and he had to go wash his hands. So lo hayu roinoso v'lo shomin es kolo. They couldn't see him, they couldn't hear him. He went out into the pitch black night, and they didn't know where he was. Ad sheshomim kol shel eitz she'asa ben katin muchni lepkior. Until all of a sudden they heard the creaking of the sound of the kior machinery being turned in order to be able to raise, it sounds like, we're presuming we're raising the kior at this point. Vehein homrim, and then the people would say, Higia es kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, it's time to wash our hands, min hakiyur, from the kiyur. So therefore, my lav dimisalikle, aren't they raising the kiyur? Now, if you're Rav Chisda, and he says you don't have to worry about the kiyur being submerged, why did they have to raise it? This guy could have run out there. Remember that the Trumas Hadeshim was done before the first light, so therefore he could have run out there, they could have left it out. So what were they lifting it for? So the answer is, Alma mashkale. The answer is they didn't hear the sound of it being raised, they heard the sound of it being lowered. Because when he finished washing his hands, it's immediately before alos, immediately before it's going to start to get light, so they would have to submerge it right then. So therefore the sound that they heard was the sound of the kiyur getting submerged. So he says, Mi demashkale, mi mishtama kale. So he says, well, submerging isn't quite nearly as noisy as raising it up. Raising it up, they had to use the pulleys and the winches. It was very heavy. To put it down, right, you just, I don't know, push it in.
Right. Like gravity.
Seems much easier to put it down. So the answer is, mashkale begilgula. They did, actually. Even when they lowered it down, they used the wheel with an intention of making some noise, because by hearing the sound, that's when the Kohanim were signaled time to be able to get out there and wash their hands. So lishnachrina, another version, demashkale bechomarte, kihechi delishtama kale, that they were making noise, and this is just a different version, different word. Bechomarte also means the wheel. They would turn the wheel in order to be able to lower it down, and they did that intentionally so that they would hear the sound, vilisham a, and then they would hear the noise, vilese, and then the Kohanim would come running in, time to wash their hands. V'hahava gvini kuros. Why did they have to make the noise? They had a guy. His name was Gvini, and he was the announcer. Now, the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash, was around for 420 years. So it wasn't always Gvini. So there are those who explain in other Masechtas that the either people who became really good at their jobs, right? They just named the job after the person. Or the people who had the job first, right? This is Jeff's job, right? So therefore it just became his job, right? To take care of all the advertising and the coordination of the Daf Yomi and everything. So that's the Jeff. Who's Jeff, right? Who's going to be Jeff next, right? So that was the right? So okay, the camera guy, right? So who's the Yehuda Yonah of the camera world, right? What's going to happen? Who's going to be that? That was how they would name it. So okay, so Gvini the announcer, his job was to tell everybody, okay, Kohanim, get out there. So therefore, if it was his job, why do they need to make noise? So the answer is, Beit Trei Hekeri Havi Avdi. They made two things to recognize it. The Shama Mehai Asi, V'Shama Mehai Asi. If you heard the wheel, you came running. If you didn't hear the wheel, you heard the announcement. So then you heard the announcement. Whatever it was that got you to come, there was a shortage of, they wanted to publicize and get everybody in there in order to be able to get ready to start the service. So therefore, that was the announcement. Okay, so that's the end of that little piece there. So we know about submerging, and they kept it submerged, but they kept it submerged all night, or they only submerged it right before morning, subject to arguments and disagreements between the opinions. Okay, Gufa. Let's talk about the kiyur itself again. One of the things that we mentioned during the class yesterday that we sort of went through fast was Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, that we said in the name of Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina, Kol kiyur she'ein bo kedei lekadesh arba kohanim imenu ein mekadshim bo. The size of the kiyur has to be enough that it holds enough water for 4 Kohanim to wash.
Right.
Okay? Because that's what we said. Shenamar, the pasuk says, "V'rachatzumi menu Moshe ve'Aaron ubanav." Right. Moshe, Aaron, and Aaron's two sons. So 4 people have to be able to wash from it. Meisvei. So we asked the following question: Kol hakelim mikadshin, bein sheyesh behen revius, bein she'ein behen revius. He says that all utensils can be used to wash the kohen's hands, whether they hold a revius or whether they don't hold a revius. A revius is a quarter of a lug. How much is a quarter of a lug? A quarter of a lug is about 3 or 4 ounces. That's how a revius is the amount of wine we drink for Kiddush. That's another time that we use that measurement. So that's about how much water. So you're talking about washing your hands for netilas, for washing. How much do the Kohanim have to wash their hands with? Kiddush cup, right? Get your Kiddush cup out, and just pour it right. That's all they needed, right? It wasn't that much. So when you're thinking how big the kiyur is, it's got to have enough water to hold 4 Kohanim. No, not necessarily so much, right? Maybe 12, I don't know, ounces, I only use ounces. Maybe a liter or something like that. It wouldn't have to be that much. Okay?
It says a Luke here. Rashi says a Luke, no?
Right, it says halug, because a revius halug. You have to read it like that. Bein she'ein behen revius halug mayim, quarter of a lug,
okay,
right?
sorry.
Right? Now, and he also says, Afal gav deleka shiur gabi netilas yadayim. There is no, this is good for halacha, there's no shear by netilas yadayim, legabe kiddush lo ba'inon shear, right, by kiddush, even so there is a shear, sorry. I forgot, no, deleka shiura. When did we change that? Girsa there? Diba'inon, yeah, that's a diba'in shiura gabi netilas. You have a certain amount of water that you need by netilas yadayim. By the washing of the Kohanim, more lenient. It wasn't really a Tuma Tara issue, and therefore it was just, right, you go into the base of Mikdash, you wash. Okay? So now, Amar Rav Ada Barava, so Rav Ada Barava says, Bekodeach besocho, so he says, if you poke a hole in the side of the kior, right, so the water will shoot out from there, right, make like a spigot that comes out of there, that's good, right? You know, that by itself is going to be is enough to be able to wash the hands, right? You don't need a utensil. Now, v'ha mimenu amarachmana, but the Torah says that it has to be coming from the kior, meaning that you need to have. Well, the question that we have is, it says you can use any utensil, right? It doesn't even need to hold a revius, the utensil. So, well. Do you really need if you don't need to use, if you don't have any size, you can use the smallest amount. So then how are you understanding that you're using the kior? You don't obviously have to use the kior according to this. So the answer is yirchatzu l'rabos kli sharis. So he says, okay, so it means you have to wash. It says, the pasuk says yirchatzu. Mimenu means that you have to wash from the kior. If you're going to wash from the kior, so then you need to have a kior that holds 4. Enough for 4 kohanim. Then it says yirchatzu to tell me it doesn't have to be. You don't have to wash from the kior. You can use any klisharis, any service utensil, right? And that will be sufficient to be able to wash as well.
Would a faucet be good enough? Just
a faucet isn't a utensil, right? You're going to need a utensil.
Like a kavart for washing your hands.
Right. You need a utensil
for poking a hole in the
side of the kior, because then you're washing from the kior.
Right. So would a faucet be considered?
If you have, well, I mean, our faucets don't have a utensil because you're pumping water, right? It's through pipes. So you need to have some sort of a collection, right? If you pumped and then you had some sort of collection potential, but we're going to also discuss, right, whether you need the water has to be dunked from below or not. Anyway, so now, if that's true, if it says you can wash in any event, so then klichol nami. Why do you need a service utensil from the base of Mikdash? Just use washing cup, use anything. So Rabbi klichol matisar mikal v'chomer. You can't use a regular utensil. It has to be a service utensil. How do I know? From a kal v'chomer, because the pasuk says mikino, the base of the kior. Because it's set, you're not allowed to use it. It says makino shenimshach imo eno mekadesh. You're not allowed to use the base of the kior to wash from. So the base of the kior was a big square box, right? It had no top on it, because then they would put the round basin into that. That's how it would sit and rest, right? You'd have a round box, so it would have a flat place to rest into, and then you put the big round kior into that. Okay, so you can't use that base to wash from. You have to be able to use the kior. So, if the base was anointed together with the kior, and that's not acceptable to use, so klichol she'eno nimshach imo, so a regular washing cup that never got anointed and never got declared useful for the services, eno nin she'eno mekadesh, for sure that shouldn't work. You can't use just anything. So therefore, you have to use the kior, you can use any other service utensil. Those are your choices. Okay. Vekino minolan. How do I know you can't wash from the base? Right? There's a presumption that you're making. What's the source for that? Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Yochel yehekino mekadesh kedersha kior mekadesh." You might think that you could use the base, fill up the base with water, and use that just like you use the kior. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says very clear, "Vasisa kior nechoshes vekano nechoshes." You should make a washing basin that is made out of copper, and you should make a base made out of copper. Now, why does it have to say nechoshes twice? Just say, make a basin and a base made out of copper. So, linechoshes hikishisiv, the answer is, the base and the basin had one similarity, and that is, they were copper. Velo ledavar acher, but they're not similar in other ways, meaning their purposes are not the same. Can't use the base as your kior. Fine. Amar le Marzutra Bray de Rav Mari. So Marzutra, the son of Rav Mari, says to Ravina, Ma lekino she'ein asoi letocho, tomar bekli, chol she'asoi letocho. He says, yeah, but there's a difference there. The base is not really made to be holding anything inside of it. That's not the purpose of it. So maybe that's why you can't use the base of the kior, but you can still use another utensil. Ella, so rather, mimenu lumute klichol. From the fact that it says that you're supposed to be able to pour the water from the kior, means that it has to be from a service utensil or something like the kior, not a non-sanctified utensil. Ihachi, if that's true, klisharis nami, so then if you're going to tell me that it has to be from the kior, then even if it was a sanctified service utensil, it's not the kior. Maybe it doesn't work at all. So therefore, Rabbi Rachmana klichol. So therefore, the pasuk comes along and says yirchatzu in order to include also, in order to include it. So. So somebody says so. Ha Rabbi Rachmana yirchatzu ma rois zeh. So ma rois. So how did you know you had to include one, right? You had to include either the sanctified service utensils for washing or the or a regular utensil. So how did you know which one to include? Zeton meshicha kamahu v'zein ton meshicha kamahu. Well, the service utensil requires to be anointed just like the kior, so it's more similar to the kior, whereas the non-service utensil is more different than the kior than a service utensil is. So therefore, a non-service utensil is no good. Okay. So bottom line, you can use the kior. You can use a other service utensil, right? If you need to. Okay. Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, Kol ha-mashlim lemei mikvah, mashlim lemei kior. Any substance that you can use to fill up and complete, let's say you've got a mikvah. Mikvah is supposed to have 40 sa'ah of water. I'm not sure how many liters that is. Everyone's looked that up. But anyway, but you have 40 sa'ah of it's the cubic volume of 1 amma by 1 amma by 4 amos. Right. 3 amos.
Mm-hmm. So
4 amos.
2 feet by 2 feet by
4 feet.
Yeah.
Right?
No, by 8 feet.
By 8 feet. Thank you. Yeah. So that's the cubic volume of water for that. That's what your 40 saw is. Okay. So now, if you have almost 40 saw of water, and you put other things into the water in order to, then the volume goes up to 40 saw, anything that you can add to that water is acceptable in order to include in the kior as well, in order to get to the 4 kohanim measurement as well.
As long as the 40 saw is rainwater, right? That's what we said?
Except that we're 40 saw minus a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Right? You have to be able to fill this up, right? But l'revius eino mashlim. However, as far as the quarter of a lug that you need in order to wash netilas yadayim, that's for your meal, like when you wash for bread, that you can't. You can't add anything to that. That shear was more set, and also because it's such a smaller amount, right? So the amount of water you need to wash netilas yadayim for what do you call it? For netilas yadayim can't put something else in there, right? So what kinds of items are we talking about putting in there? So l'me'ute mai. So what kinds of liquids are you talking about putting? What kinds of things are you talking about putting into this? So ilema lemute tit hanoduk. Maybe we're talking about some mud, right? Some runny mud. So runny mud can be used. What we would be saying is you could put some runny mud, right? Some liquidy mud into the kior, and that would be just fine. Also, you could get that into your mikvah, and that would be just fine. But if you get that into your netilas yadayim cup, you can't wash with that.
Didn't we talked about this with wine mixing into the water with the mikvah, and if it was...
We did, if it changes the color and things. The color was an issue, right? That's right. Well, so it was in Ma. Very good.
Wow.
That's impressive, guys.
Well, I'm a great Rebbe. Okay, good.
Look at that.
Okay, good.
Wow.
Thank you. So, heichi dami. So, okay. So, what kind of circumstance? How runny is this mud? If it's so runny that if it was on the ground, a cow would drink from it, that's pretty runny, right? That's pretty liquidy. So, afilu revius nami. That would be liquidy enough that you could even wash netilas yadayim with that. That would be liquidy enough. We're used to washing our hands with very clean water, but back then you'd go dip in the lake water and you get, be cloudy and muddy. So if that's the type of water you're talking about, that's fine for Netilas Yadayim as well. And if it's so thick that a cow would not drink from it, afilu mikvanami ein mashlim, that wouldn't work for the mikvah either, right? As we said, it's going to be too thick. It's going to not be valid for the mikvah. Ella, so rather what we're talking about is l'ma'ute yavchushin adumin. So we're talking about red midges. Red midges. Not midgets. Red midges, which is apparently some kind of fish that spawned in their water that was there. So therefore, if you got some red midges, so you can have those swimming in your water, and that would fill up your tank to 40 sa'ah, right? But you can't have red midges in your Netilas Yadayim water.
Right.
I don't know what a red midge is. I read that in the art school English. If you, somebody who is trying to find a picture of a red midge.
We have them, the tiny red, it says tiny red bugs. I feel like I've seen them as a kid around here.
There you go. Yeah. So there you are. So now, afilo, so he says, okay, well, afilo be'inaihu nami. So he says, well, red midges, if you had a mikvah full of red midges, you could go to the mikvah in that. That's gross, but no problem. Right? Why? Because Dahatanya, we learned a new halacha in a brisa, new das. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Kol shetchilas."
Red midges are bloodworms.
Bloodworms,
which are red. Labeled state of certain midges are a certain vital food.
Very little. So they're very small, I would imagine. Right? They spawn in water. Yes, and they are great for mikvah use.
Perfectly acceptable.
I don't know.
And bait for catching fish. so okay, so there's your red midge. So in any event, right, the rule of the red midge, the rule is that anything that spawns in water, min hamayim mat bilin bo, you can dunk in the mikvah in that thing. Right? Anything born in water is water. Okay, so that means Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi. Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi goes one step further, and this is gross. This is good for the boys. Ready? Matbilin be'eno shel dag. If you've got a large enough fish, you can go to the mikvah in the eye of a fish. A fish's eye is filled with, what is it, vitreous humor, right? That's what it's called. That's the eye liquid. That's your eye is all filled with liquid, right? That keeps the pressure up. So if you go dunk in a big eye fish's eyes, that would be a mikvah. You could go to the mikvah, right?
It's got to be a big fish.
That's right. That works because it is in the water. Wow. So therefore, red midges can't be the issue. Amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says, "L'meute noton se'ah v'notal se'ah." He says, what we could have a situation is that where somebody filled the mikvah with a se'ah of water, so he got up to the 40 se'ahs, and then after he had 40 se'ahs, he put another liquid in, which would invalidate a mikvah. But as Brian said, once you've got 40 se'ahs, we can be a little bit more generous. Then after he adds, now he's got 41 se'ah of liquid here, he takes a se'ah out.
Rabbi? Wouldn't chlorine uncertify something for mikvah?
Does not seem to be a problem. Right? And it probably would be in this category. Once you've got your 40 se'ah of water, if you add something else to it, and then if you take some back out, you're fine, right? And it's okay, right? In fact, that's so. Ditnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, mikvah sheyesh bo mem se'ah mechuvenes. If you've got a mikvah that has exactly 40 se'ah, nasan se'ah, if you put another se'ah of water in it, then notal se'ah, and then you take. Right, you put another se'ah of some other liquid in it, and then you take a se'ah of water back out. Now, you must, if you've mixed some other foreign liquid in, then you take another se'ah out of the mikvah. You're definitely taking mostly water out when you take your se'ah out. Therefore, your mixture is not pure 40 se'ah of water. Nevertheless, once it's mixed into the mikvah of 40 se'ah, it's part of the mikvah, and you can now take one se'ah back out, and you're okay. Harei kosher. That makes a kosher mikvah.
Is that because it becomes batal?
I think so, right? And I think, but nevertheless, you need to have the kosher size of the mikvah for it to be established as a mikvah first. So I don't know that it's just a bittul issue, because theoretically a bittul issue could just simply be if I had 21 saw of water and 19 saw of non-water, then it would be buttal, right? That would be, maybe I would be able to answer that. That would be a buttal situation. This is one step further. This is a mikvah rule, which says once I've got the mikvah, then ruining it is a lot harder than than getting it kosher in the first place.
Just to take it to an extreme, technically I could add 80 saw or 40 saw onto the other 40 saw and then remove 40 saw.
I suppose so, right? As long as we didn't wind up what we added, of course, if it changes the appearance, that is where we had talked about putting red wine in versus the white milk and those kinds of things putting in. Milk is less of a problem than red wine, subject to those rules. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda bar Shila, Rav Yehuda says Shila Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan says name Rav Asi, said name Rav Yochanan. Ad rubo. You could keep doing this, and this is, I say, can I add 80 or whatever? Not really. You could do this until you take out most of it, right? So, what does he mean by rubo? He says, I was in the right place. Ad rubo, right? Once 50% of the mikvah is made up of the bad liquid, then that's where the rove comes back in, right? So now making the mikvah in the first place needs more than rove. It needs all 40 saw. But once you've got the kosher mikvah, I can keep adding and taking away, as long as I'm not left with rove of the foreign item, of the foreign liquid.
How would you know that?
That is a great question. I was wondering the same question, right? I don't know. The easy answer for me to say is through chemistry analysis, right? You take a water sample and you can do an analysis and figure. I don't know if that's how they did it.
In a beaker.
Yeah, there must be rules on exactly how to do it. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yep.
So I'm not exactly sure how they knew exactly when the rove was. Not the main part of our Masechta though, so we're okay. So Amar Rav Papa says im kadach bo revius, okay, then matbilin bo mechatin vitzinorios ho mehechsher de mikvah asya. What you can do is, and this is what we do with our kalim mikvahs, right? These are the interesting little things, right? I've got a big mikvah. I don't want such a big mikvah for my kalim mikvah because if I drop something in my kalim mikvah, I don't want to have to dive in to go get it. So what we could do is, you take your big kalim mikvah, you make a little side pocket off to the side, right? Over here. And then this little section is fine for me to dip my small utensils in, and I don't have to worry about dropping them all the way down in the mikvah because it's connected.
Some mikvahs have baskets. Would that be enough?
That's a good idea, right? A basket's a good idea, right? But there was the mikvah, I know it's been renovated, but the mikvah in Chicago 25 years ago used to have the keli mikvah on the outside, right? So therefore, when you pulled up in the parking lot, there was just like this basin that came out of the wall on the outside, and you just opened it up, and it was like a trough of water connected to the mikvah on the inside, right? But on the outside, I don't know how that stayed. I guess it stayed warm in the winter because they heated it on the inside. Right? So have right. So that seems right, because that's fine, because it's coming from a kosher mikvah. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Reish Lakish. That's our mikvah sidetrack. Rabbi Yirmiyah says in the name of Reish Lakish, "May mikvah kisherim lemei kior." Right, the water from a mikvah is kosher to put into the water of a kior. That's fine. Lememra de lo mayim chayim ninhu, which means that you don't need what's called mayim chayim. There's a different level, right? A mikvah water is a cistern, a collection of rainwater. Right? It cannot be she'uvim. We have water called mayim she'uvim. That's when you take water and you draw it in a utensil, right? Once the water is drawn up in a utensil, you can't use that for a mikvah. Water that gathers in a cistern, right? Not a cistern, in a cistern, right? And water that gathers in a cistern is mikvah water. That can be a basin where all the water collects. And then you have, you also have mayim chayim, which is a running spring, right? That is live water, right? You don't need the kior to be mayim chayim. You can have a cistern and collect the water there. That's fine. Vehatanya, but don't we learn in a brisa? That's what Yirmiyah says in the Rish Lakish, right? But we have a brisa that says, "B'mayim velo b'yayin." Pasuk says about the washing of the limbs, right? That you should wash them in water, right? But that means that you cannot wash them off with wine. You can't just take any liquid and rinse off the salt and the blood and things like that. B'mayim velo b'mazug, right? It has to be with water and not with a combination of wine and water mixed together, because they used to combine their water and wine together in order to be able to make it drinkable.
It would dilute it.
Right, diluted. Can't use that. B'mayim, right, it has to be with water. L'rabos she'ar mayim, which means that you can use any kind of water for washing the intestines and the stomach of the animals. You just need to, it can be even she'uvim, even drawn up water. The kal v'chomer lemekior. And then we're going to have a kal v'chomer that's also, you can also use the mekior to wash with this, right? You can take water from the kior and use it to wash out the insides of the animal. Okay, now, what's the kal v'chomer, right? So, my kal v'chomer lemekior. What does that mean? There's a kal v'chomer. So the answer is lav de mayim chayim ninhu. Aren't we saying because the mekior, the water in the kior, is mayim chayim? It's spring water, so it's for sure even better for purification purposes. No, that's not what we're saying. Dekadish v'kadishi v'dekadish. It has become sanctified because it was put into a holy utensil. It was put into the klishares, the service utensil. That's why. And we might think that a regular water, take a bucket of water and I can use that to rinse out the intestines from these animals that they're slaughtering for korbanos. For sure, I can take a bucket of water from the kior. That wouldn't be a problem. Why? Because it is kodesh. It's holy water. V'kadishe me'al yusahi. Well, is that better? The fact that it has been sanctified, does that make it better to use? V'hotana debei Shmuel. Didn't we learn in a brisa from the yeshiva of Shmuel that says, Mayim she'ein lehem shem levai, that whenever water is mentioned in the Torah, so it has to be water that has no additional adjective attached to it, right? Plain water. So therefore, Yatsu mekior sheyesh lem shem levai, which means that you couldn't use the kior because the water from the kior has an adjective, because it's not called water, it's called water from the kior. That's the adjective being the place, right? Mekior. This is mekior. It's not mayim, it's mekior. That makes it different. So therefore, any place that the Torah tells me that you have to be able to do something with water, the water from the kior, is actually bad. Can't use the water from the kior. So how do I know? So why would you think that kal v'chomer I can use the water from the kior for rinsing the insides of the intestines of the animals? Elalav reuyin kior. What we mean to say is that you can use water to rinse the insides of the animals from water that is appropriate to use for the kior. Alma mayim chayim ninhu, which means to prove. Let's prove from that brisa. What does that mean? What special water could there be? Mayim chayim. You need special mayim chayim to be used in the kior. And what we're saying is, for sure, you can use mayim chayim to rinse it out. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to answer that this is a machlokas.
Couldn't you have said that where it says mayim shein lahem shmi levei, that's referring to mayim chayim, because that's chayim as well. It's not kior. It doesn't say. It's just saying another word.
Mayim chayim, right? What? That mayim chayim would also be bad. I'm thinking the same way as you. I like that question.
What's the translation for kior?
Kior is a basin.
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 Yes.
Basin. Mm-hmm. Like typically keep the water in. Or any sort of liquid.
We're just not considering mayim chayim to be a
like a second word.
Yeah, and I wonder whether the Torah ever calls it mayim chayim. It does say mayim chayim, but because it says mayim rather than may kior versus mayim, it's called mayim. It's a fair question. I'm going to try to see if I see somebody who questions why mayim chayim isn't a descriptive word, but mayim chayim for sure would be acceptable. Okay, so the answer is it's a tonight. It's machlokas tanaim. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says mei kior. Rabbi Yishmael Omer mei mayan heim. Right, when it comes to the water from the kior, so Rabbi Yishmael says that they have to be water from a spring. Right, this is Rabbi Yishmael. He says it. The Chachamim disagree, and they say shar meimos heim. They can come from any regular mikvah source, and they can be drawn out for that purpose from a regular mikvah and used in the kior. Okay, so that is, and Reish Lakish holds like the Chachamim, Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yishmael, and so that's where your argument comes in. Okay, next, back to what we were discussing, which is the original topic of our Mishnah, which was which Kohanim or which people cannot do service in the Beis HaMikdash. We got sort of into the idea of washing hands. It's because we said one of the people cannot do service in the Beis HaMikdash is somebody who has not washed their hands. And then we had to go into some detail about what the time is, how the washing the hands took place, and all of those things. But now back to our topic. The next person on the list is an Arel. An Arel, somebody who has not had a circumcision. So Minolan, how do I know that person, right? Even if it's for a medical reason, doesn't necessarily have to be a bad person who is, he has not been circumcised. He cannot do the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash. Minolan, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, Davar zeh mitoras Moshe Rabbeinu lo lamadnu. We never really found a source from that in the Torah. It doesn't say it anywhere in the Torah that you can't. Midivrei Yechezkel ben Buzi lamadnu. But if you read the Sukkim in Yechezkel, you see it there. Because it says, Kol ben nechar arel lev arel basar. Right? We had talked about a ben nechar and a arel lev was a Kohen who was not religious. And then we said somebody who is an arel basar, somebody who is not circumcised. Lo yavo el mikdashi, cannot come to perform my service. Ominolan de machli avoda. So how do I know? That says he can't do the service. How do you know that if he does the service, it invalidates it? Dichsev, as the pasuk says, Bahaviachem b'nei nechar arei lev arei basar lios b'mikdashi. Right, that when you bring these these arei lev and arei basar to come to my house to profane my house. So it says when they come and they profane. So profaning means you invalidate the offering. So therefore that's in Yechezkel. And we said, okay, well Yechezkel can't make up new halachos. The answer is it was a halacha Moshe Misinai up until the point of Yechezkel, and then Yechezkel wrote it down. But that's our source is Yechezkel. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. Ben Nechar, right? What in the pasuk in Yechezkel says a Ben Nechar, a son of a stranger. So he invalidates the service. So Yachol Ben Nechar Mamish. You might think that that's coming to tell me a non-Jew, like a literal non-Jew, right? That's a simple translation of a Ben Nechar as a non-Jew. Talmud Lomar Aralev. Therefore, the pasuk comes to say, no, an Aralev, which means that he is an uncircumcised heart, right? So a non-Jew, of course, has an uncircumcised heart, meaning he doesn't believe in Judaism. That's what the definition of an Arel Lev is. Well, that would mean that a Ben Nechar, for sure, is already invalidated under the category of Arel Lev. Im Kain Ma Talmud Lomar Ben Nechar. So if that's the case, then what is the point of writing the word Ben Nechar? What does it mean? Shenisnachru Ma'asav La'aviv Shebas Shemayim. What it means is that he is cut off. His actions are cut off. His actions are strange to his Father in heaven, right? We called him a non-frum guy, right? So he's not allowed to do it. Sorry, yeah. So now, Fry Kohen, correct? Because otherwise he's a zar. That's an invalidation besides, right? Ve'ainli ela arel leiv. So now this means Ben Nechar is somebody. He's an arel leiv. Somebody. That's a description of it. Is an arel leiv. Arel basar minayin. How do I know that somebody who's literally not circumcised, not just mentally not circumcised? How do I know to include that? Talmud lomar ve'arel basar. The next part of the pasuk says a person has to be circumcised. Utrichiani, both of them, because of Rachman arel basar. Somebody told me that you need to be circumcised in the flesh. Mishum demois. Maybe because there's a disgustingness to a person that still has an orla, right? He still hasn't been circumcised. That's not right. About orla leiv de lomois, but a person who just is, he appears normal. He just isn't doing the right mitzvos, so maybe he could. Amalo, so therefore it has to tell me that he's not eligible. V'yashmin an ara leiv, and if you told me that it was only that a person who is a not from person can't serve, mishum de'ein libo l'shamayim, it's because his mind isn't serving Hashem. Aval arel basar, but somebody who is not circumcised, de libo l'shamayim, he could be 100% a from guy. right, has a medical condition and can't get a bris milah, so ema lo, so I might think that he's not exempted, or he doesn't invalidate the offering, so tzrichi, I need both of those, that both of those are in separate invalidations. Okay, next.
But don't they wait for the infection to go away before they circumcise him?
Sorry?
Don't they wait for the infection to go away?
We do now, right? But then there's a halacha, and we'll get not to get too sidetracked again, but there's a halacha that if you have a chazaka, let's say a woman gives birth to babies and they get a bris milah and they die, right? Yeah. You don't have to continue to give bris milahs to the brothers, to the continuing on brothers after you have a chazaka, that there is the danger there, right? So therefore there is a possible way for somebody to be 100% a from person and not have a bris milah. Right. Okay. So now, the next thing we say is tamei puzzle. Somebody who's tamei was really almost the first one that when we got started with, but we never really brought it in. We just said v'yinazru, right? We said from the pasuk v'yinazru mikodshei, they should separate from the kodshim. The people who are tamei have to separate from the holy things. So somebody who's tamei invalidates the service. Okay, so amru ziknei darom. So the elders of the south. Who are these elders of the south? Fair question. The elders of the south are either from the Mishnah's times or from the Gemara's times. Not necessarily clear in the Sukkah. Different Rishonim hold it different ways. So we'll leave that floating in the air. So these elders from the south, lo shanu ela tamei sheretz, right? This is talking about somebody who's tamei sheretz, right? Somebody who comes a dead creepy creature, right? It's a dead rodent of a dead, right? Those kinds of these lizards or whatever they were, right? So that is going to invalidate even b'diavad. Ella, right? Aval tamei mace, right? But if somebody became impure because they came in contact with the dead, right? And they do the service for an individual, so then. That is okay. The korban is not nullified. Why? Mitoch shemaratze betzibor, maratze nami biyachid. Since if the entire community was tamei, right, you could wind up bringing korbanos betuma with a kohen who's tamei. Mm-hmm. If this kohen is tamei in that type, but only tumas mace, if a kohen is tamei of that type, b'diavad, it doesn't ruin the korban that he's bringing. B'diavad, after the fact.
If everyone is tamei.
But we're saying now that since if everybody was, then I'm saying even if everybody is not, he should not be serving, right?
I thought
he should not be serving.
I thought tamei shiratzim was at the same level as tamei mace. I thought they were the same thing.
No, tumas mace, you have to get sprinkled the ashes of the paraduma. Right. You have to on day 3, day 7. Shratzim, just go to the mikvah, right? It's not the same at all, right? Not the same level. And also, tumas ohel only applies to tumas mace, also to avodah zarah, but it doesn't apply to because we learned gzera shava from the tumas mace, but it doesn't apply to tumas sheretz. There are differences, right? They are an avatuma in the highest level, right, but the way that the tuma gets transferred is different. Okay, so Hachi, if that's true, tamei sheretz nami leisiva kavachomer mi tamei mace. Well, if a kohen b'diavad after the fact, he is tamei mace, he doesn't invalidate a sacrifice. Then let's say that kavachomer, somebody who's tamei from a sheretz, he also should not invalidate a sacrifice because tumas sheretz we said is less severe. You're only tamei for the one day. Not tamei for 7 days. So let's say ma tamei mace sheton hazah shlishi ushvi meratzeh tamei sheretz she'eno ton hazah gimel ushvi eno din shemeratzeh. If you don't need to get sprinkled with ashes from the paraduma to become tahor from a sheretz, then that's for sure more lenient than tumas mace, where you have to get sprinkled with the ashes from the paraduma on day 3 and day 7. So kasavre ziknei darom mechaprin kemischaprin. The answer is the Ziknei Darom, these elders from the south, they hold that the Kohanim have the same halacha as the person who is receiving the atonement. So he says, right? The Kohanim are the same. They have a hekesh between the two. Therefore, ma miskaprin tamei mace in tamei sheretz lo, people who are receiving an atonement, right? They can be tamei mace. How? And they can send their korban through another person. They don't even have to walk into the Beis Hamikdash to deliver their korban. Somebody could be tamei mace, and they can deliver their korban. So therefore, af mechaprin. So therefore, when the Kohanim, most of them are tamei, so tamei mace in. I skipped a line. Sorry. Ma mischaprin tamei mace in tamei sheretz lo. So a tamei sheretz is not allowed to bring a korban, right? He's got to go to the mikvah. He's got to wait till Harav Shemesh. He can't send his korban during that day while he's tamei sheretz. Whereas somebody who's tamei mace is allowed to, right? So also somebody who is mechaper, the Kohanim, also can serve and b'diavad not ruin a korban if they do so when they're tamei mace, but not if they're tamei tumas sheretz. Okay, so now where are we talking about? What is the circumstance for this? My kasavri. So what are they holding here? What are they thinking about here? So I kasavri ein shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. Are they holding? Let's say you have a person. It comes Erev Pesach. Okay, let's talk about our Korban Pesach, right? Classic example. Otherwise, why would we not just wait until the person's tahar anyway, right? But the answer is, it's Erev Pesach. I've got a Korban Pesach to do. I've got to bring Korban Pesach. This guy becomes tamei, touches a sheretz. So, can he send his offering to the Beis HaMikdash, have it brought on his behalf? He's going to the mikveh today. Tonight is the Seder. Once it's nighttime, he's tahar, he can eat the Korban Pesach. No problem. So, I kasavri shochtin al tamei sheretz, if these bnei ziknei darom, if these elders from the south are holding, that you can slaughter the korban for somebody who's tamei sheretz on Erev Pesach, and he can eat it that night, amai lo avdi tzibur betuma. So then, why couldn't the Kohanim be able to do that if they become tamei? You see that the people themselves, when they're tamei sheretz, can have their korban brought on their behalf. So the Kohanim themselves can be tamei sheretz, and b'diavad, after the fact, they shouldn't invalidate the offering. Ella kasavri shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. Sorry, I skipped on again. Right, I keep doing that. Ha kol shebeyachid nidche tzibur avdi betuma. I skipped again. So let's go back to Micah Savri. Micah Savri, what are they holding? Ika Savri zorkin shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. If they hold that you're allowed to shech the korban pesach and sprinkle the blood for somebody who's tamei because he touched a sheretz, right, before he dunks in the mikvah, right, and if he doesn't go to the mikvah, then he's pushed to Pesach Sheni. But otherwise, right, amai lo avdi tzibur betuma. So then, why couldn't if everybody in Kahal Yisrael becomes tamei tumas sheretz, why would that not be acceptable? The Kohanim could then serve in the Beis HaMikdash as tumas sheretz. So ha kol shebeyachid nidche tzibur avdi betuma. So we have a rule that whenever we have a circumstance that an individual would get pushed off to Pesach Sheni, if everybody in the tzibur has that tumah, so then they're able to bring it on Pesach Rishon, betuma. Okay, so therefore, meaning, if one person is, if the question is like this, if one person is tamei tumas sheretz, does he have to bring a Pesach Sheni?
If he has to bring no, I don't know.
Because the pasuk seems to tell us that only tamei tumas mace. So therefore, if you're tamei tumas mace, so then, if everybody's tamei tumas mace, you could still bring it on Pesach Rishon, because if one person was tamei tumas mace, we would push him to Pesach Sheni. That would mean that they would be holding that if one person was tamei tumas sheretz, they if they're holding that person's tamei tumas sheretz is getting pushed to Pesach Sheni. So then that means if everybody is tamei tumas sheretz, you could bring it on the first korban pesach. You can bring korban pesach on the first one also, and that means the Kohanim could do the service that way also. Why is it that they're holding that tumas sheretz is invalid by a Kohen doing the avoda? He invalidates the service. Ella, so rather it must be kasavri. They hold shochtin v'zorkin al tamei sheretz. They must hold that if somebody is tamei tumas sheretz on Erev Pesach, doesn't push you to Pesach Sheni. You can bring that, no problem, on Pesach Rishon. Okay. So, just a couple more minutes. So, Amar Ula. Okay. So Ula,
I'm sorry. That shows that even if a Kohen is
if a Kohen from
Sharatzim, he could still bring.
So a Kohen who's tamei tumas sheretz
right.
could not his tuma invalidates an offering, but by tumas mace his tuma does not invalidate his offering.
He could bring it on Pesach, but he wouldn't be able to bring another.
And therefore, during the rest of the year,
right.
if the Kohen was tamei, he's not supposed to serve. But if he does, then it doesn't invalidate the offering.
Right, even if it's tumas,
only tumas mace, but tumas sheretz,
he can only do it on Pesach. He
can't do it on Pesach either, right? He's saying tumas sheretz, a Kohen cannot do the service with tamei tumas sheretz ever.
Oh, okay.
Right? Tamei tumas sheretz is not, right? Remember what he says, Amru ziknei daram lo shanu el tamei sheretz, right? Only tuma that invalidates an offering is tumas sheretz, but tumas mace is not. That's okay. Tumas mace. Why? Because a Kohen could be tamei tumas mace on Erev Pesach and bring a korban Pesach if the whole tzibur is tamei. That's not the case by tumas sheretz. Okay. Amar Ula. Ula said about this, Takalahu Reish Lakish lidromai. So, Reish Lakish made a vociferous complaint against these elders from the south. This is why there's some of the people who are holding these elders from the south are Amoraim, right? Rabbi Reish Lakish is making a vociferous argument against them, right? Even though it sounded like we were bringing proof from them what they were holding from Bryces before. Now they're arguing. Seems that Reish Lakish is able to, or according to people, says that it's really they are an opinion in a brisa. What we're saying is he vociferously wanted people to know not to follow them. He said, "V'chi eze koach merube," which is the greater strength to push off tuma? He says, koach mechaprin or koach mischaprin? So is it the people who are getting the atonement or the people who are bringing the atonement? Koach mischaprin, he says the people who are giving the atonement, right? Because the people who are giving the atonement are they are the greater issue. Now, Uma b'makom shenitmeu balim b'sheretz. If you're going to tell me a regular person who becomes tamei with a sheretz, mishalchin korbanosehen, they can send their korban in and it would be okay. So kohen shenitma b'sheretz, if a kohen becomes tamei b'sheretz, ve'eno meratzeh, right? He's more strict. He's not less strict. We're going to say, we're going to compare. He should be more strict. He shouldn't be able to bring it. Makom shenitmeu balim. So therefore, we're going to say that he's suggesting that, okay, even if we suggest that a person can send in his korban when he's tamei tumas sheretz, that doesn't mean that a kohen can serve when he's in a status of tumas sheretz. So he says, makom shenitmeu balim b'meis, if the owner is tamei mace, she'ein mishalchin korban sehen, and based on that, he doesn't send his korban in. He's tamei mace. He waits till Pesach Sheni. He doesn't bring a korban on Pesach Rishon. Kohen shenitma b'meis eno din she'eno meratzeh kal v'chomer. He shouldn't be allowed to do the service. The kohen on tumas mace. If tumas mace, right? If we don't allow it by the owner, right, we have to remember that the kohen is the stronger of the two.
Right.
So if you've got something that you don't allow by a regular person, don't say it's equivalent. It's not equivalent. The kohen can't do this service. This kohen can't. So therefore, the kohen can't do the service as tamei sheretz. For sure, he can't do the service for somebody who is, if he himself is tamei, right? Unless it's so. Kasavri ziknei daram tamei meis mishaleach korban osav. The answer is the people from the south. They held that somebody who is tamei meis can send his korban into the Beis Hamikdash and have it brought, even if he is tamei meis, right? So the haksiv. One second, how can you say that? The pasuk literally says, "Ish ki tamei v'asa Pesach b'chodesh hasheni." What's the whole point of Pesach Sheni then? If you're tamei and you can send your korban in on behalf of somebody else, the answer is how can you do that? So the answer is lemitzvah. He says, yeah, lichatchila, you can wait till korban Pesach Sheni. But b'diavad, even if you're tamei, this is these ziknei daram, big chiddush. If b'diavad, if you're tamei meis, you can send your korban in and have it done, presuming you're going to become Toher that night, right? You've got to time it right. You can't be in the middle, right? So then you can send your korban Pesach in b'diavad. The haksiv, but the pasuk says, ish lefi achlo, right? They have to be able to eat their korban. They have to be able to shech their korban Pesach for somebody to be able to eat it. So this korban, this person who's tamei mace, he can't eat it. So the answer is lemitzvah. That's only lechatchila, right? Lechatchila they have to eat it, right? Ulakuve lo. You're going to tell me that it's not a requirement to be able to eat the korban Pesach? Vatanya, we learned in a brisa that says the michsas nifashos, right? Let's say a person takes, right? Pasuk says by the korban Pesach, he and his neighbors who are near to him in his house, the michsas nifashos, they gather together. They appoint people to their korban, right? Melamid she'ein haPesach nishchat ella limnuyov. This tells us that there's a mitzvah. The korban Pesach can only be shechted, only applies for the people who are on that korban, right? You can't jump in later after the korban's already shechted. Okay, shachto shelo limnuyov. Let's say they went and they shechted it for the wrong people. So then yochol Yehei over al mitzvah, you might think it's just b'diavad. It's not a namalomer. The pasuk says tachosu. It says separately tachosu. You have to appoint it on the sheep. So hakasuv shana alav la'akev. The pasuk is writing it a second time to tell me these people, who the people are that you're setting up your korban pesach for, is critical, right? So therefore, the itzkish ochlin limnuyav. There's a hekish. Hekish is where you write the two different rules in the same pasuk next to each other, and because it says that he is supposed to eat it, what he's supposed to appoint, and then it says ish lefi achlo, each person according to how much they eat. Why does they have to talk about their eating? The answer is in order to connect the two. Just like the korban has to be shechted for the sake of the right people, it has to be shechted for the sake of people who can eat it. So the answer is ziknei daram lo makshi. The Ziknei Darim don't make this hekish. So therefore, they say having it for the right people is critical. Having it for somebody who can eat it, not so critical. That's only a mitzvah. V'chilu makshi nami, even if they don't make that hekish. Mehanami islu pircha. We still have another question, right? Still Reish Lakish's question exists, right? Reish Lakish had a great point. Reish Lakish's point of that a Kohen who can't be tamei tumas sheretz in order to bring a korban for somebody who is he can't be tamei tumas sheretz. He has to be tar to bring a korban for somebody who is tamei tumas sheretz. So he can't be tamei mace and bring a korban for somebody on behalf of somebody who's tamei. A kohen can't be tamei mace. It's a good question. So what are you going to answer? So uma b'makom shenitme ubalim b'sheretz shemasachin korbasim lechatchila. He says in the circumstance where there's a tumas sheretz that they can send their even lechatchila. There's the korban, they can send their korban. There's no Pesach Sheni for them, right? So they come tamei tumas sheretz, they send it in. So then kohen shenitma b'sheretz ino miratzeh. So a kohen who becomes tamei by sheretz, it's not. He can't bring the korban. Makom, because that's what even the people of the south said. The first kohen is doing the sheretz can't do it. Makom shenitma ubalim b'meis, a circumstance where the balim are contaminated with a mace, she'ein meshachin korban osim lechatchila. According to Lakish, you couldn't send it at all. But now you're saying, okay, they can send it, but lechatchila they can't. They're supposed to wait for korban pesach sheni. So therefore, for sure, kohen shenitma b'meis eino din sheni maratzeh. The kohen tumas mace shouldn't be acceptable either. So the Gemara does not answer that question. It sort of leaves that as the final thought, which implies that Reish Lakish's question is very valid and concerning, and therefore it would seem from the conclusion of the Gemara that tuma of any sort invalidates an offering, unless it's a korban tzibur, unless it's a public offering, and then it would be acceptable. But an individual's offering would not be acceptable. All right, it's a good place for us to take our Yom Tov break.
It's the same word as we left off last time.
Mesaveh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Stoya.
Only.